Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Freight Expectations. I'm Bridget Myers, and joining me today is Adam Hill, President and CEO, and Matt Wilcox, VP of Operations at Scarbrough Global. Today we're discussing the full truckload and LTL markets. And let's start off by just kind of how did 2025 end up, and then we can break down 2026.
Sure.
You want to start?
Yeah, I can get started. So obviously 2025 was a challenging year when it came to freight, more of the norm as far as from 2024 and 25. So we've seen a little bit of spike in rates in December, but that's mostly just driven by holiday. But from a truckload standpoint, we've seen a lot of capacity exiting the market. Still not enough to change a lot of the pricing yet. Demand was still somewhat sluggish from that standpoint. So an LTL is just more of the same. So it's just density-based pricing. We didn't see a real increase in prices across the board. But 2026 will be an interesting year, I think. So.
Saying it mildly.
We said that about, I feel like every year since like 2021, we're like, next year is going to be an interesting year.
Yeah.
It just keeps going and just keeps going.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the importance of the webinar today, is that there are going to be some challenges for 2026, and we can kind of touch on hopefully some of those for shippers out there and what we're seeing or anticipating.
And you get a lot of questions about 2026 from our customers as far as what we're seeing. Obviously, in the truckload, there's no V recovery like we're used to seeing in the market, right? So even though pricing may be ticking up slightly, the capacity is still an issue, even though it's starting to tighten. And then, like we talked about from a LTL standpoint, it's going to be more of the same. So kind of setting a new norm, I think, in my opinion, where the density-based pricing is out there. Carriers are still going to ask for their increases. Capacity is not really an issue as far as that's concerned. So,
but I mean, if we take a step back, I mean, talk about you for a minute, right? Like, I know Matt just recently moved into the COO role here, but at the end of the day, it took me 17 years of not getting any business from Matt in his previous life as a shipper. It took me like 17 minutes to convince him to come work for me at the end of the day. But I think your insight around where we're headed is obviously valuable. I mean, you've really only been on the service provider side a couple of years. So,
correct.
And I think from our perspective here, the people on the call, it's a unique, not a lot of people sit in your shoes, right? Not a lot of people came from a career in our customer side and is now in our side of the business. And whether you think we're on the dark side or not, and I guess we can all have that argument later, right? Like who wins what side. But I do think 26 is going to be an exciting year. I think the craziest thing we started to see, especially at the end, is all the bankruptcies, right? That's 2025 steam, at least the last half was on the truckload side, is getting excessive.
It is, and I think you're still going to see more throughout 2026. I mean, the rates aren't still sustainable for a lot of the carriers to cover, obviously, fuel costs, labor costs, maintenance costs. You're seeing not a lot of reinvestment into new equipment either, which then also has an impact on capacity and everything else too. So, but yeah, coming from the shipper side into our side, the dark side, as you like to call it, right? I used to call it all the time.
You probably used to call it
exactly. It is a interesting switch. Because when I'm out calling or working with customers, I can anticipate a little bit on some of the questions, or more than likely on some of the answers, because I would give the same response. And from like an annual bid process to, I think the misnomer out there is my annual bid's going to lock in my rates for the year, right? Yeah. Which is not necessarily true. So unless you're able to guarantee that capacity or the shipment volumes, that rate's not going to hold up throughout the year. And we're seeing more and more as more of the norm, especially from an LTL side, is as we talked about a little bit before, you're seeing mid-year price increases instead of the old traditional, 20, 25 years ago, one annual increase. And you're seeing that take place more frequently now.
That leads to my next question. When you look forward to this year, what should shippers unlearn about freight and the market that they've been experiencing since 2020?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. For me, it goes back to the annual bid, right? So that used to be kind of set in stone. I'm going to lock my prices in. I'm going to get my best rates and everything else. I'm going to go out and get set my RFP out there. And I think what you're seeing more and more of is you're starting to see some more of the shippers going in and negotiating directly with carriers. And towards my end of my career as a shipper, I did a lot of that as well. So you can work on more important things as far as dwell time, and you can look at service, because I think people get stuck on going for the cheapest carrier that's out there, and the cheapest isn't always the best solution. So you want to know what your total cost is for that lane or for that mode. So I think getting past that, I just need to save myself, $5, because in the end, a lot of times that $5 savings can cost you a lot more than that. So
Okay.
I think the big thing for me in all of this is during the pandemic, I feel like for the first time in a long time, partnerships mattered, right? Like service mattered. Freight was coming out of our ears, both internationally and domestically, and service mattered. And it feels like in the last year or so, with I think tariffs and everything else, volumes are down, people are a little uncertain. Everyone's going back to let's drive the bottom dollar. And I think that causes the bankruptcies. That causes, I'm not saying that getting a good price is not the best option and you shouldn't be paying significantly more. But like you said, that last 5% typically costs a lot more in collateral damage than what it's truly worth at the end of the day. And I think for me, it's getting back to a partnership, because that's what this is, where we get to have conversations with our customers around being strategic, not just did my freight pick up today? Because if that's the conversation we're having, it's a transactional conversation, and that's not, we want to be a long-term partner. I think that's, to me, we seem to have seen this shift happening very quickly. It seems like we unlearned some of that partnership very quickly coming out of the pandemic, and now we're back to a little bit more transactional model than we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, it was a little chaotic during the pandemic. And when I was on the shipper side during that pandemic, it was rates were whatever it cost to move, you just moved it, right? So we're seeing more of a norm. So and the other thing you really need to think about too, going into 2026 is like I said, just the dwell time and stuff. The carriers are going to be less willing to absorb those costs, and they're going to be passing on a lot of those costs. So when they have a 2-hour window for you to unload or load, it better be 2 hours. So figuring out how you are more efficient at loading is going to make a big difference.
Yeah.
Or accessorial cost from an LTL side too. They're definitely seeing a lot more stickiness from a carrier side upholding those. So
Okay. Do you see any shippers reacting to false signals based on what they should be looking for, and what should they be looking for instead?
Yeah, you do see some shippers looking at the false signals. Like right now, obviously, you see a spike in some of the rates because it's weather driven. And in December, there's a little spike in some of the rates because of the holidays. And I think some shippers are thinking, oh, here comes the recovery in some of the carriers. But most of the carriers know that it's mostly weather related. And I think you're going to see that more and more frequently as there's less capacity available in that truckload market, because we've driven some of that capacity out with the bankruptcies. And so it's, like I said, some small disruptions will create some issues going forward. So, but
And some massive snowstorms in the mix.
Yes.
And
I mean, like if you look at this
in Q1
spot market today, as we're looking for some of our customers that are shipping to the southeast, it's a challenge to find the truck that's willing to take that load, and B, if you can find them, there's a spike in that rate. But again, weather related. So.
Okay. Well, if they're misreading that on the market, what other planning assumptions should they challenge now besides that about whether?
Well, I think if you look at just the LTL market, right? You want to control your accessorials. So you need to work with carriers. You need to make sure you're paying attention to that, to the different accessorials that are out there being challenged or being charged, and push back where you can from a carrier standpoint. But from a truckload standpoint, like I said, you just got to pay attention to the economy that's going on right now. So there's opportunities out there. So from a carrier and a shipper side. So working with your 3PL broker or working with your carrier to
Mhm.
maximize.
You had mentioned capacity a couple times before. What do you anticipate that'll look at throughout the year, not just Q1, for long haul and regional
I
carriers?
think your long haul truckload, there's definitely a little bit of a capacity issue there with the carriers that have been out of the market. So you're going to see a little increase in pricing in the long haul just because of that issue. The regional pricing from a truckload is pretty stable. So I don't think you'll see any kind of massive uptick in pricing there. And from an LTL standpoint, again, like we talked about before, there's plenty of capacity for those carriers. And so you're going to see some price pressure, but that's just their normal 6-month or 1-year price increases. So
I mean, if you think about it in the long run, you hear people talk about driver shortage.
yes,
And is there one? In theory, yes, there is a driver shortage.
true.
But at the end of the day, it's a rate problem.
It is.
It is not. I have yet to ever hear a shipper tell me someone didn't pick up if they were paying a consistently profitable rate to a carrier.
Correct.
But when carriers start operating at operating margins at 106%, where they're losing 6 cents for every dollar that they're charging the customer, if they can choose not to pick up that day, they don't.
Mhm.
And so I think and it's not their fault. I don't necessarily blame them, but that's the nature of kind of what we have driven as a society, as a group. Everyone's looking for that last dollar savings, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, this year we've put out a lot of people out of business.
We did. And I mean, you see that whether it's a spot market or whether you have a contracted carrier, sometimes those carriers will chase that higher rate too. So, because why am I going to haul that rate for a loss, like you said, or I can make a little profit and cover my costs and put a little money in my pocket too. So we're definitely seeing that.
Okay. Well, you mentioned a little bit about carrier behavior. Should shippers watch for any other signals or a shift in the market with carriers to kind of maybe offset any concerns on service?
Well, I mean, so if you're looking at pricing and if you're starting to see if there's going to be a pricing increase through the year, there's some things to track. If you're looking at tender rejection rates, if those start to increase, there's that capacity is definitely getting tighter. You can expect a little higher rates in those lanes. And you should also look at the spread between your contract rates and your spot market. So a lot of the cases, I think some people are moving away from some of the spot markets for your very heavy, dense lanes. And definitely using your spot markets for either increased volume, heavy replans that are unexpected, and different regions that they're not used to shipping to. So, kind of the main indicators, in my opinion, when you start looking at the market.
What can you, do you expect any more carriers to exit, consolidate, mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah, I think
It's going to happen.
you'll definitely see some more. I mean, it seems like every day when you get publications, there's another carrier or there's another broker that's closed their doors, and you'll continue, I think, to see that throughout 2026 until it gets right sized, especially the truckload market. So even with the shrinking of the capacity, there's still excess there, and we're not seeing the increased growing capacity in that market. So, which is indicating that it's kind of right sizing, but it's still ways to go.
Are you seeing any regions that might be impacted more than another?
There are, but it's mostly kind of shipper related in my opinion. So, I mean, you've got good regional carriers that are located everywhere. When you look at a mode, again, you go back to the long haul, full truckload is definitely an area that's of some concern with the carriers that have been going on the market. So, but when you look at just regional based, it's still no one region is worse off than the other. So, in my opinion.
The other interesting thing is while we're looking at like truckload go out of business, right? We see some consolidation there just because, or LTL, we saw yellow, what is that, for 2 years, I guess now, right? It's been a while, and the consolidation there. No one's really talking about the flip side, which is the parcel piece of this, that you're starting to see a lot of like regional players come in and companies starting to move away from what I'll call the big three, which I think is kind of an interesting take on how the entire domestic market's starting to move. And we haven't really talked rail, but just those LTL shipments now, because there's so much direct consumer business,
There is.
so much of that, a lot more regional parcel providers now. And you're starting to hear people, there's companies that I've never heard of that are like, oh, we service this 6-state region, or I think just an interesting change in the market that everyone's trying to figure out, where do we land?
Yeah, e-commerce drives a lot of that, right?
Yeah.
So, and you see a lot of that in the market. So, yeah, and I don't see that trend decreasing or flipping anytime soon. Obviously, it'll continue to be an area of growth. So, final mile is another big conversation when you start looking at business and consumer. So, I mean, from an industrial standpoint, still your largest mode of transportation for industrial is going to be truckload, right? Heavy, dense freight. From a replenishment, it's usually inventory. We don't see the spikes like we did a few years ago with inventory out of balance. I think inventory is normalized across the U.S. now, and at a point where you're not going to see a big spike. So,
Okay, well, it's not really regional, but what about cross-border? So like Mexico and Canada, what are we seeing in those areas, and what do we think it's going to look like the rest of the year?
so great question. I think from a cross-border standpoint, I know we are getting a lot of inquiries for shipments into Mexico and out of Mexico. So we're doing a lot of studies for customers when it comes to nearshoring and what's that look like, what's my total cost. And we do use tools, and I won't name the specific tools, but we use tools that are used to either source carriers that have already been sourced in Mexico for freight in and out of, so which has provided us good options to cover those loads, and good safe options, because we haven't even talked about theft and cargo theft and everything else too. But on the cross border, though, I think you'll continue to see that impact on the nearshoring, at least through 2026 and beyond.
But I think there was a concern, right? I mean,
There was.
trying not to get overly political here, but with kind of the current English proficiency of truck drivers and the amount of drivers crossing our southern border, we have an operation in Laredo, so we're on the ground. We see this every day, but we haven't seen the dip
No.
like you would expect with everything running. Like, the dip doesn't exist as much as, is it slower? Yes, but is it that much slower for what I would have anticipated? No, it's not. So I think there's a lot more capacity in that market than maybe we realized was available.
There is. And I think a lot of that cross-border, I think where you're going to see the benefits the most from a carrier standpoint are more short to medium hauls out of Mexico. There are some long hauls out of Mexico into the U.S. and stuff, but most of that benefit's going to come from like your mid-range or as far as delivery points and stuff. But Canada, we do a lot of cross-border into Canada too, and out of Canada. So just don't see as much action as you do in the Mexico side of the business. But I mean, there's a lot of influences or impacts too. You look at decisions that are made from policy.
Yeah.
You look at labor that's down in Mexico that will have impacts on what will happen tomorrow. So
I think the other interesting thing is oftentimes in Canada, we see the same carrier on both sides of the border.
Yeah.
And in Mexico, we don't always see that, right? We see it very often where a Mexican carrier brings it into a place like Laredo, drops a trailer, and then a different power unit hooks up and delivers it all the way through. So I think we're able to absorb a little bit more and not feel as much of a crunch because of that.
we are, and we're also seeing a lot of inquiries that are shipments from Canada into Mexico and vice versa too. So bypassing or going through the states. And like I said, we're seeing an uptick in that volume as well. So it goes back to, I think we were through last year very busy doing freight studies for customers and prospects, and that will continue on this year too. So.
Okay. Well, let's focus a little bit on some service and reliability and kind of bring it to you. How are 3PLs helping shippers build resilience in your transportation strategies and when it comes to those issues?
Yeah, I mean, we can bring a lot to the table, right? So, I mean, besides just the spot market that helps when you've got inventory that you need to move somewhere quickly or a delivery to a customer, but we can also provide the contracts you need from an LTL side. I mean, as a shipper, historically, if you had rates contracted directly with an LTL carrier, it was difficult because if you were not guaranteed any kind of volume, you get a lot of pushback from an LTL carrier based on the pricing they provided. So from a 3PL standpoint, or as far as our brokerage is concerned, we can flex our volumes that we use over multiple customers, right, to keep their rates in check. So we also bring technology. I mean, technology is a large cost for customers. Some customers will pay, hundreds of thousands of dollars for their TMS. I know in our particular case, and our TMS is provided at no cost to our customers. So you look at reports, and I mean, from a technology standpoint, you shouldn't just look at a TMS as a dashboard that's going to provide you a fancy report. So, mode shifts, consolidations. So 3PLs can help with a lot of that. So, and bring more value to it than just, hey, I save $5.
So the other thing is, it's interesting. We're in 2026 now, but the number of shippers who still do not have a TMS platform that aren't utilizing even internally.
Yeah.
I mean, we have customers that still have maps with color coding on them that says this is the carrier in this region. And I think there's also a lot of noise in the technology space with AI is going to replace all of us but I think that a partner helps provide technology we have customers that, we only maybe move 10% of their volume because they have contracted rates, but it all flows in our TMS. So I think we're trying to provide that because not only does it help them, it just makes them a better customer at the end of the day.
And the visibility is king, right? So we talked to a prospect yesterday, and they're still using spreadsheets, and they have a routing guide based on their spreadsheets and zones they're shipping to. And how can you, from an analysis standpoint, if you're not running through and capturing that data, how can you figure out where you're leaking as far as cost? Whether it's LTL, again, back to accessorials, or whether it's a mode shift. You see a lot of customers may try to ship 16,000 pounds on an LTL carrier. Obviously, there's a cost to doing that. So, providing that solution by using technology is a way to help solve the issues they have and kind of get your total landed cost where it needs to be. So again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's not about just, I want to save $5. It's how can we help you to.
Right. Yeah, no, that's where I was going to go next is how can we help shippers manage costs that are not always upfront? So the dock dwelling and the scheduling that you talked about, reclassifications.
And claims. Claim management is a big challenge for a lot of shippers. And I know previously when I was on the other side, we had one employee, that's all they did was work claims. And it gets to be kind of costly when you're out there trying to recover or offset a claim. So we take that burden on with our customer. So it helps from their standpoint. So free up time for more important things for them to do than working the claim. And I'm not saying claims are not important, obviously, but providing that for them is a big benefit. So,
but and some of our clients have very robust shipping departments. The place that you came from, you built a robust department, and I think that's one thing. A lot of them don't, right? It's one or two people wearing a lot of hats. And what I always like to say is, our customer is expert at what they do. Let us be an expert at what we do.
Yeah, correct.
Right? You are the expert at making this widget or selling this thing. We're the experts at getting it from A to B. And I think that's the part that sometimes gets missed in this overall conversation.
And there's always a cost to building that robust department, right? So,
and maintaining.
It is. Yeah. And we do some analysis with prospects that will come to us and say, hey, I've got this department, it costs me X. What can you do to replace the department? They're always going to have a manager or a traffic person that's going to help manage the process, right? But what can we bring as a solution to help keep their cost in line, making sure that they're capturing all the savings they can and ultimately getting product from A to Z and making sure it's there timely and meets their customers' needs. So like I said, we do a lot of analysis when it comes to that with customers. So,
do we think over the last couple of years that claims and accessorial reclass that has become more contentious with LTL carriers?
It has. I think since we moved to the density-based classifications, we're seeing a lot more reways, and so we're fighting that. And as a shipper, we didn't see the need to weigh our product at a certain point in time. And so We moved away from that to make sure we had scales in our facilities, because once you had scales, you had it was certified and you had your receipts. It was a lot easier to stake your case against a carrier. So I mean, doing that work up front as a shipper to make sure that your weights, your measurements are correct, will reduce a lot of those reweighs. And we've seen a lot of reweighs and a lot of reclasses based on that density model, which can cost a lot of money.
I mean, it makes sense though. I mean, historically, shippers signed FAK type pricing at specific classes, and so be it.
Exactly.
And now it's not necessarily the case any longer, and there is a lot of that. And as much as I know it's probably caused some pain for some of the shippers out there, it is how the rest of the world functions. So just in general, it does make life simpler.
It does
from that perspective.
It does, and we've talked about it before. But besides accessorials, it comes back to wait times and as far as detention cost and fighting those battles too. And so as a shipper, making sure that you turn those trucks as fast as you can. So make sure you stay within those windows and like I said, control what you can control. So.
I think the other big piece is too, right? We've already talked about carriers are operating on a loss oftentimes. Well, this is revenue enhancement, right? At the end of the day, this is finding the extra $5 that they needed to take that load from a loss to a win. And I think you're seeing more and more of that. And they're getting better data. They're getting better at it. And we're only going to see it and continue.
Okay. And that kind of leads into, again, you touched a little bit about automation, AI, technology. What role does it play for load tendering, carrier selection, exception management, all the fun stuff that comes up every day?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of automation that's out there, and there's a lot of AI tools that are available.
Yeah.
It depends on what level you'd like to look at. I mean, there's tools out there that can help you on the back end, that can help the back office as far as collecting proof of deliveries, follow up on rates, and everything else. But also, I mean, if you look at even some of the AI tools out there, you can build different modules within these so-called tools that are out there to help you from a consolidation or route optimization. So they're definitely something that as a shipper and as a broker too, you're going to start utilizing more and more of the AI. So it definitely has a benefit in today's market. So, and it'll play a larger role going forward too. So it's something that's here to stay, obviously. So
how should a shipper evaluate a 3PL's tech? That it's not just a dashboard, which is very important to know where your shipments are and manage that. But what other analytics technology should you be looking for?
Should be what the value it brings to you, right? So like I said, you're not coming to a 3PL just to get your pretty dashboard or from that standpoint. It's what else can help with, like mode optimization we talked about, tracking the accessorials, because they'll help you from negotiating with the LTL carriers and what you can push back on. And as far as just lane management, I mean, you can go out there and do your evaluation as far as your cost, where you're leaking funds. So like I said, there's a lot of opportunities when it comes to that tech, and making sure you have the right tech is very important as a broker. Or as a shipper. So
definitely, especially in a market that we're anticipating moving forward, the ability to make some adjustments as things change.
My first 4 years at a company, we did not have a TMS. We were one of those that were using a spreadsheet, basic set of tools, and it was hard to manage. You could always see the snapshot, the look back, but you could never predict the look forward. And there's a lot of tools out there too from as we go out and look at rates, there's a lot of good tools out there that are kind of forecasting where we are today, a 7-day window, 30-day window, and a 13-month window for us to help with the customers to kind of help project what their costs may be, 3 months from now in lanes or regions. So
I think one of the areas we've seen some failures from a tech perspective is that people assume that they go out and they buy this TMS and now it is the golden goose. And the data still has to come in. The data still has to be reliable. We've had a lot of conversations with folks say, well, we just went and sourced a specific tool. My first question is, who's putting the data in?
Mhm.
And they kind of give you this look, and it's like, well, if you're not connected with all of your carriers, if your carriers aren't providing feeds back like ours are,
Mhm.
how do we're just right back to managing on a spreadsheet. Now we're just managing it on a screen instead of in a spreadsheet, but we're doing the same thing. And I
Mhm.
think that's to me where makes people are using tech as what they see as this golden goose idea that it's not necessarily as golden as it seems outside of its price.
No, and you have to be able to do something and be willing to do something with that data.
Right.
I mean, instead of just reporting on it month in and month out, but not using that tool to help you improve. I mean, you see a lot of that too, that, hey, there's my report, but spot those trends, use that data to better your
Know how to
supply
break
chain.
it down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, what mistakes are shippers still making coming out of 2025, the volatile market that we're looking at? And what's the biggest thing you would recommend they take a look at and change?
Again, go back to the annual RFP, talk about
Mhm.
that, as far as not necessarily, it depends on how you want to use it, right? But not just relying solely on that RFP.
It's a tool.
It is.
Mhm.
It helps you from a direction of where you think you're headed, right? And then some of the other mistakes again, we're going to talk about it again, but as you start looking at accessorials, they can drive a lot of expense to a company. So making sure you're managing that. And so not just accepting what it is and moving on. So.
I would agree. I think there's so much and everyone's being asked to do more with less, right?
Yes.
Like, I think that's the common theme. I don't think that's going to go anywhere anytime soon. I do hate to tell everyone, I feel like that's the theme every year, though. Like, I think every year you could say,
Yeah.
you could have been
Yeah.
1947 and like, they're asking me to do more with less. And that's still, I think we're always going to get the same question today. But
Mhm.
I think in our job too, I feel like it's changed in that world is historically people just gave us data and we didn't do much with it. Now our job is to help provide data and provide insight and help give some ideas around what it is. And actually the poll answer, I'm going to steal your question asking for a minute,
Sure.
because one of the things that I think, Matt, you and I have talked about a lot is obviously everyone's biggest concern, at least the majority, is cost.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand if like, oh, my cost went up 5%. But when you start to look at that cost as a percent of your sales or a percent of the value of your product, I don't know how impactful I would say most of the time, some of that increase is a rounding error.
Yeah.
Where we've gone from 0.002 cents to 0.003 cents. Well, wow, that's a 50% increase
Mm-hmm.
when you think of it like a number.
Yes.
But when you truly take a step back and look at the number, I think there's a lot that we have to think about and maybe how we look at transportation spend in general. And I mean, you've talked about it. I mean, the first place every one of our customers goes is transportation.
Yes.
I can assure you all we are not printing money over here.
We're not.
I think bankruptcies and some of the other stuff show kind of the razor thin margins that industries like ours live on.
Mhm.
And our industry gets beat on often.
It does.
Right or wrong. It gets beat on often for that cost savings. And I think a lot of times what we're looking for, or we're afraid to say, wow, that's a 50% increase. I can't accept that. But when you look at it against the actual cost of the goods moving,
Yeah.
I mean, you look at a truckload and that truckload's maybe $100 more than you're used to paying, but the goods in there are worth 50 grand. Like you don't even see that $100.
Mhm.
Right. So I think there are ways to maybe think through this and I mean, like I said, we talk about it all the time is historically, that's where you came from too.
Yeah.
The first place a cost cut would come.
Every time you'd get someone to walk into your office and say, our transportation costs are too high.
Mhm.
It's like, based on what? I mean,
The internet.
what's revenue to say that conversation?
The
You know
internet.
what my rates are and things like this, but it's always the first to go to because it's usually a large expense for a company, right? So, but like I said, there are other ways to make sure you're handling things properly. Your line rate may be fine, and as far as your for certain lane or certain
Mhm.
cost per mile and stuff, but you have to watch out for any other additional cost. And whether
Mhm.
it's, we're not talking about drayage or anything like that in today's meeting or anything, but you start looking at different costs that add up in a hurry. And
Mhm.
it's,
I think we could. I mean, I think we could
Yeah.
talk drayage with chassis splits and chassis
Split.
repositionings and flips. And I mean, that
Maybe,
world has
I mean,
changed
it
significantly.
has, and there's been a lot of capacity out of that world. So, which is it's starting to put a little pressure on the cost side of it all. And there will be more exits, I think, in that world for a little while based on just the rates that are out there. I mean, you're seeing, I mean, last year there was a lot of rates in the truckload market that people are just covering their, bare bones minimum just to try to keep their fleets moving and ultimately end up costing them their business.
So shippers are wanting to put their business out to bid.
Correct.
What new questions or how should they ask questions differently to look at these costs and changes so that they can have those conversations on the front end and make a good decision on who should they award their business to?
A lot of it's going to be, I mean, total service, right? So if you're looking for just, I'm going to save me 5 cents a mile, I mean, that's not the right way to approach things. But what else can you bring to the table? What else can you bring to my business that can help me in the long haul? Whether it's a TMS that I get as a shipper for no cost, right? I mean, that's real savings for a shipper. What kind of service am I going to get from your account servicing department over there? Can you handle anything other than than domestic freight? So I mean, there's other services that can be provided, and a lot of times it's at very little cost or no cost increase. So, but it comes down to customer service. So, and it's one thing that I think everybody's got to focus in on is how are we making sure the product gets from A to Z, right? Getting to their end user, but are we making sure that we're communicating up front? Are we making sure we're communicating throughout the service? And that's, from our standpoint, we use a tool. If it's a truckload move, we can provide, like I said, a URL or a tracking device that can show exactly where that truck is pinged every 5 minutes until it gets there, which is a valuable piece of information now. It gives them a little comfort and stuff.
Yeah.
And, how are you vetting your carriers? I mean, that should be the number one question that should be asked to any kind of broker is, how do you vet your carriers, right? Because we see a lot of theft in this industry. It's just increasing. And so like we use tools that are out there that go out there and can vet the carrier pretty quickly, return a lot of good information. You can shut down a carrier pretty quick based on, flagging them with the potential theft, which then they've got to prove that it's not them. So there's a lot of tools that should be able to come along with those rates instead of just a rate. If you're just shopping for a rate, then you got to look at the total package.
Well, you have to remember, the end of the day, this requires an ass and a seat, right? This requires a human.
Yep.
So it's all about the human in that truck driving that, because without that, I mean, I know we've tested some autonomous trucking, but where we are in that today is, I still feel like we're a decade out at least from really seeing some improvement there. And if that's truly the case, I mean, like you talked about vetting those carriers, understanding what they're about. And you talked earlier about technology, and a lot of where we use technologies to help with that. Like, is their insurance up to date? How safe are they? And then we get complaints also, and you see them all the time where the FMCSA is not kept up. A carrier is maybe a good actor, something happened, but their score lags where that comes in. And I think everyone has to be cautious of some of these truly nuclear verdicts that we've seen in the trucking world. And what does that look like? Because right now we've had a few verdicts, and there is a case in front of the Supreme Court that's hopefully going to relieve brokers of a little bit of liability in all of this mess. But there's a lot of risk in this business, and I think people shy away from it. Theft, damage, especially LTL, we start talking damage.
Oh yeah.
And what does that look like? And I think those are the things you have to talk, because those are people things.
Yeah. I mean, even as a shipper, I mean, if you're going direct to a carrier, are you vetting them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because that carrier that you've hired has an accident, kills or harms somebody, as a shipper, you're
on the hook. Yeah.
Because they're going to come back and look did you do your due diligence? Did you check out your carrier? The score, like you said, lags.
Does.
But there are tools that are out there that can help you and utilize them and make sure that carrier A is legit. I mean, you'll be amazed at how many times you'll put in a carrier and it comes back with all kinds of multiple phone numbers or things like that are red flags immediately. So, but yeah, use the technology. And if you don't have a robust department and you're using a broker, make sure they're using the technology. So, and we burden the cost for a lot of that, but it helps us in the long run, keeps our customers safe.
So you were on the other side of the desk. Do you think it is, or did you do this? If you had goals, cost cutting here is a concern to everyone. Do you share those goals when you're putting the bid out there? As a salesperson, it's always frustrating. They put the bid out. You don't get a whole lot of communication. So sometimes you have to fill in some gaps on what you think they want.
Yeah.
Is it service? Is it price? I know it's both, but which one are we leaning on?
Well, I always wanted the cheapest service for the best,
I mean,
or the cheapest price for the best service. So
sounds
That's
about right.
white glove,
Thin line, right?
white glove, that is very.
Well, I can never steal any of his business, I think, for so long.
I think if you share a lot of the KPIs that you're tracking as far as your carriers and actually have a true scorecard for your carrier, is very beneficial for you as a shipper. So, and have meaningful meetings too. So like sit down with your carrier or with your broker and have, whether it's a quarterly business review or anything along those lines, it's a good way to at least make sure you're tuned in to what's going on. So
We all understand what we're
It is.
working towards.
exactly. And so as long as you're upfront with your carrier, your broker, and everybody's on the same page, it'll see the benefit in the end. So
How early do you start those conversations when you're in the bid conversation?
you start them early. I mean, it's just like if you're going to do a bid or you're going to go to the market, I think you're starting to see that people going to the market earlier than what it used to be. Traditionally, you'd see a lot of year-end stuff for the next year, but you're starting to see a lot more movement earlier in the year. But have those conversations early with those carriers or those brokers so everybody understands what the end goal is. So
I think we're seeing more like mid-year, more quarterly, more half-year, where it's not necessarily a fixed time frame. Like we know our volume's up or down over the next quarter, or we have a specific lane need over a next quarter, or we've had a problem and we need to go focus on that.
Right.
We seems to be we're shifting that direction more from a one and done.
it does. But you got to be somewhat careful too as a shipper, or if you're out there and you want a monthly bid,
Yep.
right? The carrier's going to do that for a few months and then like, okay, I'm not, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Am I seeing enough volume for all the work that we're doing? But at least if you're going to meet with the carriers, or you're going to go to market, just make sure it's meaningful and you actually do something with it. Let the carrier, everybody know kind of where they stand. So
We touched a little bit on what shippers should expect. What should they stop expecting from carriers and even 3PLs?
carriers eating a lot of the cost, right? So I think you're going to see a lot of pushback. We started seeing more and more throughout the 2025. And so I think you're going to see a lot of the carriers pushing back on, they used to say, okay, fine, we had an extra hour wait time. We'll
No
just
big
eat
deal.
that. I know you're not going to see that, especially as the market starts to collapse as far as, or not collapse, but at least tighten up on the capacity side. I think you're going to see more and more pushback on that. You're going to see more pushback on accessorials from the LTL if the market gets tight there too. They're going to be less willing to absorb some of those costs as well. So there are a couple key areas I think you need to watch. So
Well, what's one assumptions many shippers are making that you think is wrong for this year?
On for 26.
right now, a tick up in rates doesn't mean a recovery is going on right now. So I think that's it's a misconception right now. I mean, you're seeing weather related, right? But it's one of the main ones that we're at least hearing from some, prices are going up. So I need to lock in my rates now for the rest of the year. So, but
It's going to be bumpy, huh?
it'll be bumpy. I think this year, I mean, things change very quickly. And over the last few years, every year we say, well, this is going to be a normal year, but
Right.
I don't know what normal is anymore. I think you see a lot of, whether it's regional based, whether it's weather based, or whether it's policy, definitely has impact across the board. So
I think policy is going to play more into this. I mean, we have the English proficiency.
yes,
We have our current political climate, agree or disagree, just current political climate that we are in.
Exit markets.
It impacts the market. And, we do have a lot of CDL truck drivers that maybe are going to run into English proficiency problems or other items like that. So you tack on bankruptcy, you tack on that. And I think the assumptions that some people are making, I don't think we're going to be $10 a mile anytime soon.
No.
That'd be great. I don't think we're getting there, but I do think rates climb a little bit.
They will. I think you're going to see.
They need to. I think
They have
they need to for the market to survive.
You can't stay where they were. But I think you're going to see the lack of investment too in equipment, right? You're starting to see that on the capacity. I mean, trucks are breaking down more frequently. They're not getting the fuel economy they used to have, which all ultimately drives some capacity out of the market. So,
So it goes back to your vetting.
It does. It does. You really, I mean, theft is still, like we talked about before, it's a huge issue, and we could probably do a whole hour on theft and how to avoid or how to make sure you're vetting occurs. Yeah, exactly. But I mean,
Right. I think we could talk about we've got a great example. We had, but it goes back to my comment about being human.
Yeah.
Because it took a human to stop what was somewhat sophisticated theft
Yes.
off of our dock in Laredo, Texas, where a client could have lost $80,000+ worth of goods, but it took someone overhearing a conversation and realizing that something was wrong. I think so many people are saying, I just got to throw the freight on the truck, sign the bill and move on. That risk, it's getting too easy because the human aspect is not keeping up with just paying attention. And I think there is a big lack there. And we see it on the other side too, right? You sign a POD, freight's great. The next day, half of it's got a forklift hole in it and no one's touched it. First thing they say, well, you signed for it clean.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's always a big problem. I mean, whether it's on the shipper side, running the department, and the first thing I asked when we had damage was, how did you sign off on the bill? Did you notate the damage? And if you did not notate the damage, guess what? Your chance of winning the claim is pretty much zero. So I mean, you might be able to, based on relationship, might be able to talk them into a claim. But like I said, it's how inspect that cargo when it gets there. A quick look over. I mean, because once it's signed off on, so it gets to be a challenge.
I think it also leads into, just a general public service announcement is your cargo is not insured.
No.
And I think everyone makes that assumption. Oh, my cargo is insured. It's no big deal. But unless you have a policy that insures your cargo, you're asking your carrier, your broker to insure your cargo, your trucking company is not carrying insurance on that cargo.
No.
And you are going to get paid pennies on the dollar should a claim actually arise. And I think that hits people hard. Oftentimes they don't realize that they don't actually have insurance on their product.
Correct. LTL especially. I mean, it's pennies on the, you look at the cost per hundredweight, right? And you're not even recovering your costs, basically. Truckload, same situation. And to be honest with you, you're crossing the border going into a different country, make sure you have a policy in place. So don't ever assume that carriers can cover anything. So.
Well, I think a lot of people also tie these types of policies. They do it on the international side too. Oh, well, we have general business insurance. Our CFO's office handles all of that stuff. But until we do a deep dive to know if you're actually covered, Matt talked about crossing the border. There are special riders for trucks in and out of Mexico. There are certain lanes that truck drivers must avoid.
Yep.
And so there's a lot that goes into this. And I think a lot of people don't think about my cargo is not insured.
Correct.
And they just make the assumption that it is. And to me, that's a huge assumption that shippers can have consistently made, that typically when it goes bad, it goes really bad.
It does. And some people are saying, well, hey, that covers, got $150,000 worth of material on here.
Yeah.
That carrier, the truckload carrier is going to cover it. Well, their policy may cover 100,000 of it. So make sure you're, like I said, you do your due diligence with your carrier. Make sure you're covering your insurance, looking at your own internal policy. Do you need to buy a rider? There's just got to make sure you're smart about how you're shipping things. So.
Yeah. Okay, great. Good advice. So that you almost stole my thunder on one of my questions.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
If you could give one piece of advice to transportation leaders planning for this year, what would it be?
Hang on.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Interesting ride.
It's going to be a wild ride. And I think most people, current policy. I mean, we spent an entire hour talking about tariffs, right?
Mhm.
I think 2 or 3 of these ago. And that policy does have impact, whether it's tariff policy, whether it's, I've talked about the English proficiency, you've got truck drivers. It's going to be a wild ride in 26. Not one that's not untenable by any means, but
Yeah.
it's going to be a ride.
Mhm.
And so just hang on.
Say, be a partner, right?
Yeah.
So work with your carrier, work with your broker, develop that relationship. Like I said, it's a two-way street. So I mean, making sure that both parties understand what the end goal is. Obviously, we're trying to make sure that our customers keep their cost in line. So share your KPIs. So
Lean on your partners.
lean on your partners.
Yeah.
Because the quick shifts that we see in today's market, you want to make sure you have a good partner.
Mhm. Any leading indicators that we should be looking for
Again,
next 6 to 9 months?
I mean, I'd watch your capacity it'll kind of help you estimate what the rates are going to do. Obviously, a decrease in capacity, you'll see an increase in price. Watch your spreads between contracted carrier rates and spot market. That'll help you as well. So these are two of the main ones. And just, I mean, there's a lot of tools that are out there that do a lot of tracking of truckload and LTL rates in the market. So do some reading. So I know today's all about quick, TikTok and all these other things, but you can still read. So
Still research.
Still do your own research. So
I think the other thing that today's world, we don't talk a lot about hours of service anymore because we're going to talk about eat. But a lot of times people will quote a transit time,
yes,
and anybody that would look at it say there's no way that's a legal transit time. It can't move that fast. And I think that that's some of the stuff you have to be wary of as well.
Okay.
Use just a little bit of common sense. I mean, most carriers will quote you about 45 miles per hour as their average run rate. So if it's more than 450 miles, we're not getting there in less than a day.
Yeah. Correct. And one of my favorite things, I'm not going to name any names, but on a previous role, I had a salesperson come in and was angry that we couldn't cover a distance in a day. And I'm like, well, it's X amount of miles. He said, it's only that far on the map.
Yeah.
Well, the ledger says that far is 600 miles.
Yeah.
We're not covering that in a day. So yes, I mean, just like, especially when you quote like LTL, right? You got to remember the day of pickup doesn't count as a transit day.
Yep.
The weekends don't count as transit days. So if you're quoting your customer, it's going to be there in 4 days and you're counting just calendar days, that customer's going to be upset.
Yeah.
Because I mean, just a lot of it's going to be just, making sure that you communicate effectively. So.
Those are all the questions I had. I think it was a great discussion. It looks like we don't have the question feature working right now, but please feel free to reach out to us if you have any general questions. We're happy to answer them. I appreciate everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, Bridget.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
You.